All right, folks, hello and welcome back to Online English Class. Today we are going to engage in the process of reviewing for your AP exam. This will be our 5th day, and we're going to be turning our attention to the composition skills that you're going to need in order to write an effective essay. All right, before we do that, let's quickly run through the top of the week announcements. First and foremost, make sure you're keeping up with your discussion grade procedure. Today, there will be a unique assignment at the end of the class, just as there has been in the previous 4 days of review. You also need to be independently preparing for your AP exam, downloading all the review materials from RenWeb, and sharpening your knowledge of how to read and write about rhetoric effectively on your own. Okay, so you can do that at your own pace and with your own time, according to your own needs. The only stuff that you're compelled to do by me is engage with these videos, okay? So you also should have engaged with the College Board's background resources that simply give you a clear understanding of what you are going to be confronted with on the day of the exam and how you can access that exam. Finally, you need to make sure that you're continuing to work on your Quarter 4 essay, which is due anytime from May 18th to 22nd. All right, so optimally, you already have a great draft for that essay. You take your exam on May 20th, you spend May 21st sharpening and tweaking that exam, and then you turn it in May 22nd right on time. Or you're already done with it, and you turn it in May 18th, and you don't have to worry about it anymore, okay? So there's a variety of ways that you can go about this, but just make sure that you are that you're getting that draft done, okay? So today what we're going to do is quickly return to our overview of the rhetorical analysis review process, all right? So first of all, what we have done is we've defined what rhetorical analysis is and what a rhetorical analysis essay is. And basically, in order to read rhetoric effectively and write about rhetoric effectively, you need two distinct sets of skills. Very obviously, you need to be able to read rhetoric effectively. That requires you to understand something about rhetorical situation, something about claims and evidence, something about reasoning and organization. These two major points deal with the logic of a passage specifically, and also the ways in which the language is styled. All right, these 4 points are very important for you to be able to develop a rational reading of any piece of rhetoric, okay? Not just the ones that we've reviewed together and that have been explained to you, but a new piece of rhetoric that you've perhaps never even seen before, with a little bit of contextual information and a keen eye for the ways in which the rhetor is using devices in order to and strategies in order to develop their goal. In order to support their goal, you can analyze any piece of rhetoric effectively, okay? But not only do you need to be able to analyze rhetoric and read rhetoric rationally and effectively, you also need to be able to write about rhetoric effectively, okay? So the College Board is not just evaluating your reading skill or your interpretive or analytical skill, they're also evaluating your composition skills, okay? So today we're going to talk quickly about what it means for you to adopt to the rhetorical situation that you find yourself in, and how you can show your knowledge of that rhetorical situation by writing an effective introduction, by stepping in to the rhetorical situation effectively, rationally, and also by concluding your essay effectively and rationally, stepping out of that process, okay? If you do this effectively, then you will also be demonstrating an understanding of the audience beliefs, values, and needs, all right? The other point that we're going to be talking about today is writing a thesis statement that is that requires proof or defense and that responds to the task at hand. Rhetorical analysis, okay? So we're going to talk about what that would look like. Now, hopefully you guys already know everything that I'm about to tell you. But even if you do, let's practice it. Let's conscientiously reflect on it again, okay? It's not going to harm you to do this, okay? In fact, it might even help clarify some existing misconceptions that you might have, right? You might think you know something really well, but not fully understand exactly what you're supposed to do. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in to our review. Okay, first and foremost, in terms of introductions and conclusions, your introduction for a rhetorical analysis essay needs to show that you have a mature understanding of what it means to write rhetorical analysis. You understand your context. So, what does an introduction do in a rhetorical analysis essay? Well, very simply, all right, it lays out the rhetorical situation. most importantly, emphasizing what the speaker's goal is with respect to the audience. What are they trying to accomplish? Why are they talking, right? What is their purpose? Okay, so your introduction should lead me to a clear articulation of what the speaker's goal is. Now, do not be frilly in your introduction, right? Nothing like this. From the beginning of time, mankind has been on a never-ending quest for justice, and the forces of evil have dehumanized the value. Okay, don't do that, right? What you need to do, very simply, is unrobotically, all right? So the speaker of the document is, the goal of the document is, don't be robotic, right? Write like a human being, write engagingly, write in a way that is interesting to your audience, but it simply needs to, and concisely needs to articulate the elements of the rhetorical situation. That's something that all of you guys can do. In your introduction, right? Write this down or write this on the tablet of your brain. Your essay in your introduction needs to establish the rhetorical situation, finishing with a clear articulation of what the speaker is trying to do, what their goal is. Now, after you have done this, all right, you have an important choice to make. Are you going to finish your thesis in your introduction or wait to finish your thesis in your conclusion? Now, you must finish your thesis at some point. And what does it mean to finish your thesis in rhetorical analysis? Well, not only do you have to articulate what the speaker is trying to do, what their goal is, but also how the speaker is making rhetorical choices that make that goal appealing. Appealing to who? The audience, okay? So, either you need to articulate this in your introduction or in your conclusion. Okay, so what is your conclusion supposed to do? Well, all your conclusion is supposed to do, which you should write one. Okay, so some of you guys are in other classes that are not composition emphasized, right? And you've gotten the habit of not writing conclusions. Oh, well, they're a waste of time, and they're not on the scoring criteria anyways. Well, they are on the scoring criteria for this exam. You don't have the option to not write a conclusion. A conclusion is a valuable part of an essay that gives you the opportunity to review your own line of reasoning. Okay, so if you haven't written your thesis yet, guess what you do in your conclusion? You finish the thought of your thesis. All right, you articulate what the speaker's goal is, but let's say you just leave it open. You say the speaker makes a variety of rhetorical choices to support this goal. Well, that is very vague and very open. But then in your body paragraphs, right, because you were pressed for time, you begin the process of analyzing the chunks of the text. And as you analyze the chunks of the text, some salient rhetorical choices begin to sort of bubble to the surface. You see that the speaker is attempting to manipulate the audience's emotions in this way, and you see that they're trying to characterize themselves in this way, and you see that their line of reasoning is supported with this kind of evidence, and it leads to this rational conclusion. And all of these things build to the goal that the speaker is attempting to achieve. Well, once you have written your essay and you can look back on those body paragraphs, of which you should have multiple, analyzing multiple areas of the text, you can then, in your conclusion, guess what? Simply summarize everything that you've already said into a succinct 2 to 3 sentence thesis statement that summarizes the goal of the speaker and the choices that the speaker has made up to that point to support that goal, right? So, in other words, on the AP exam, your thesis doesn't have to come in the introduction, but it has to be in the essay. It can either be in the introduction or in the conclusion, but either way, it needs to articulate what the speaker's goal is and the choices the speaker has made in order to achieve that goal. Understood? Okay, what's the best way to do this? To put a well-developed thesis statement in your introduction and in your conclusion. Why? Because when you put it in your introduction, it provides a structure to your line of reasoning. Your body paragraphs already have a kind of logic. You follow the logic of the thesis, and then you arrive at your conclusion. What do you do in your conclusion? You restate that thesis, not using the same words. All right, you're not in 5th grade or 6th grade. Okay, you can restate that idea in an engaging and interesting way using English words that you know in your brain. All right, and if you do that, right, then your essay not only has the thesis point in the introductory paragraph, but also in the concluding paragraph. And you are double safe, double good, double great, all right? So, what does this rhetorical analysis thesis statement, this magic sentence or series of sentences that you need to write, what does it exactly entail? Well, I've already stated it multiple times, but I'm going to say it one more time. As noted in the scoring guide, I'd like for you to pull up the scoring guide from the 2019 exam. Go to question 2. That's the rhetorical analysis question. Use Google and find the scoring criteria for the 2019 AP English Language Exam questions, the free response questions. Find that. If you need to pause the video and do some digging, do so. Now let's reconvene. All right, if we look at the scoring criteria, or you can just look at it on my screen if you want to. All right, if you look at the scoring criteria, you get the point for an essay by having a defensible thesis that analyzes the writer's rhetorical choices. So you have to, all right, you have to explain and identify the significance of what the speaker or the writer is choosing to do in the text, right? And how those choices are helping develop their argument. That's why they're called rhetorical choices, because they are connected to the rhetoric, the argument. Okay, so there are some examples of theses that don't get this prompt from the Gandhi passage, which you dealt with on a free response progress check earlier this year, and we're going to return to today briefly. Okay, here's some examples of sentences that don't accomplish this goal. Gandhi sent a letter to the representative of the British Crown in India. Sweet. All right, that is very far from an articulation of what Gandhi's goal is in that letter, and also the rhetorical strategies used by Gandhi to support or develop that goal. Gandhi uses rhetorical strategies in his letter to present his case to Lord Irwin. What does that do? Well, it just restates the prompt, right? Of course Gandhi's using rhetorical strategies. This is a rhetorical analysis exam, after all. Do you think that there would be no rhetorical choices made in the text? That's not only impossible, but also irrational. So to say this is effectively to say nothing. It's not a thesis statement, okay? Now, I'd like for you to notice this phrase right here. Now, I'm not going to read these thesis statements. We're going to develop our own here. But this word "by," okay, this word "by" is so important because it introduces the fact that the student is thinking about the means by which Gandhi is attempting to convey and craft his message as appealing to its audience. That word "by" is a great word in this exam. It's an excellent word for writing your thesis statement, the word "by," because it signals that you are thinking about the means by which, the ways in which Gandhi is deploying rhetoric in order to persuade his audience. Okay, so let's practice this in real time. Let's actually try and do this efficiently and effectively, just like you will on your AP exam, okay? So we open up to the 2019 free response question, which you should Google and pull up, and we're going to reread together, okay? And we look quickly at the background information. We never skipped anything, all right? We've got suggested time. It's actually 45 minutes for this exam, all right? 5 minutes per submission, but it's the same kind of text, and it's probably going to look ultimately a lot like this, maybe not in its presentation, but it's going to be a passage about this length with some background information. Okay, so in 1930, Gandhi led a nonviolent march in India protesting Britain's colonial monopoly on and taxation of an essential resource, salt. Okay, the Salt March, as it came to be known, was a triggering moment for the larger civil disobedience movement that eventually won India independence from Britain in 1947. Shortly before the Salt March, Gandhi had written to Lord Viceroy Lord Irwin. Okay, so part of the British Raj, part of the British colonial overlords of India during this period of time. And what is he trying to do? Well, that's up to us. We need to read the passage and figure out what Gandhi is trying to say, what case he is presenting? What is the case that he is presenting? What is he trying to argue that Lord Irwin and the British government, that Lord Irwin represents, should do? And, okay, what else do we need to do? We need to analyze, break down, and explain the rhetorical choices that Gandhi makes to present this case. In other words, like all rhetorical analysis prompts, you need to identify what the case that the speaker is making, what goal they're trying to convey is, what message they're trying to communicate. The prompts say this in a variety of different ways, okay? They always use different words, and they're trying to kind of like throw you off and see if you don't know really what the heart of rhetorical analysis is, right? Because in the end, it doesn't matter if they say to present his message or develop his argument or present his case or state his cause. No matter what they say, what they mean is, what is Gandhi's goal and how is Gandhi making choices in the text to develop that goal, okay? Well, without reading every single word of this argument, okay, let's quickly go through and take a look at some choices and identify some choices that are salient in various chunks of the passage. All right, in the first chunk of the passage, all right, Gandhi says that I know that embarking on nonviolent protest is going to be a risk. Okay, but he's willing to take that risk, okay? Nothing great has ever been achieved without risks, okay? Conversion. Now, that word conversion is something that Gandhi's going to come back to in the second paragraph and explain why he deliberately uses that word. Conversion of a nation, all right, that's a word that typically has like religious connotations or the connotations of achieving some kind of spiritual enlightenment that converts you from wicked ways into better ways, all right? So again, that's an important rhetorical maneuver by Gandhi here that's related to his larger choices that he's making in order to support his argument. Conversion of a nation that is consciously or unconsciously preyed upon another, right? Preyed, that's language that is associated with kind of like a bestial, dehumanizing treatment of one group of people from another group of people. All right, it's violent language that starkly juxtaposes Gandhi's nonviolent approach. Okay, evoking a kind of sense of shame in Lord Irwin as he and his sort of ostensibly civilized and humanistic government, right, the British government, prey on another group of people who are far more numerous, far more ancient, older in their civilization, and no less cultured than itself, is worth any amount of risk. Okay, so Gandhi is brave. Gandhi is idealistic. Gandhi is a person who is spiritually enlightened and wants to convert England from or the British Empire away from or out of their evil or wicked ways. Okay. He continues this process of describing why he uses the word conversion, right? Developing that impression that I described above. All right. He then moves into a kind of testimonial in which he talks about the fact that he served the British Raj up until 1919 blindly until he began to see that this was not a good idea, that this was not right. He refers to the Indian nation as members of his own family, all right, which he has used non-violent methods. You know anything about the history of Gandhi, you know that he began his work by attempting to establish coalitions or reconcile differences among people in India themselves, and then moved into the larger goal of, with that sort of unified front, fighting against British colonialism. Okay, so he used these methods with the members of his own family, and then he says that I'm going to use the same kind of methods with you. All right, so that's a kind of another important rhetorical choice there, where despite the fact that he has been oppressed by these people, right, despite the fact that he has been exploited, he and his quote-unquote family have been exploited by the British Raj, that they are going to respond to that with nonviolent action that is similar to the ways in which Gandhi would approach his own family members, his own dearest, most intimate connections. Okay, he then moves into the next paragraph of talking about his plan through civil disobedience, and he essentially reasons, all right, listen, that the British government is evil. right? They are exploitive. They do not approach India as equal partners. They exploit them. There's a monopoly. This is obviously a shakedown. This is born out of greed, and Britain needs to be purified of their greed. In other words, the clear logic here is because British overlordship of India is evil, we must disobey. We must do something about it. Okay, so that's the first sort of rational conclusion that he presents to Irwin. Your governorship is evil, right? So we're going to disobey. Oh, and by the way, the manner of our disobedience, right? Because we must disobey, and we know that you will not take kindly to our disobedience, we're going to do so in such a way that breaks, disfigures the justice system, right? There's going to be hundreds of thousands of people to arrest. We're going to flood your prison system. We're going to flood your justice system to the point where it's no longer functional. All right, we're not going to shoot anybody, we're not going to kill anybody, but we are going to break your justice system. All right, so those two arguments lead to the rational conclusion on the part of Irwin to what? Well, right, to relent. Okay, to reconsider the salt tax and other examples of colonial injustices. Right, because A, they're definitely going to rebel, all right, and B, they're going to rebel in such a way that completely disfigures and renders dysfunctional the justice system of the Raj itself. Okay, he then returns to some ethical and pathetic appeals in the final two paragraphs. He says that he doesn't want to cause any embarrassment to Irwin. Once again, right? This individual who represents a government who has harmed Gandhi and his quote-unquote family, right? Who has participated in the oppression of Gandhi, whether consciously or unconsciously, that has preyed on him, right? He doesn't. He is kind to him. He is gracious to him. He doesn't want to embarrass him as far as he can help. Okay. Now this little additional phrase here has a kind of veiled contingency, right? I don't want to embarrass you, but I'm also not going to back down, right? So Gandhi is both humble, but also courageous, direct, and sort of stern, or has a backbone, right? And in that way, he characterizes himself as this kind of nonviolent, virtuous man who is also who is humble, but is not significantly weak-willed, right? He's humble, but he's not weak, all right? He's a fighter, but he's not violent. That's a significant sort of characterization, self-characterization strategy that is evident in the text that we would take note of, and it's an important choice for developing his argument, right? As he attempts to appeal to Irwin by illustrating the strength of his resolve that is coupled with this sense that, hey, but I don't want, like, I'm not trying to harm you. I'm not trying to embarrass you. I'm not operating out of hatred. I'm operating out of ultimately love. I want to convert you and to purify you from the greed that blinds you to the inequity of the actions that you are pursuing here. Okay, so the Gandhi's rhetoric here very similar to MLK's rhetoric during the nonviolent civil rights movement in the United States history. Okay, so really cool thinkers here, really great rebels here. Okay. He then assures that the letter was not intended as a threat, but the performance of a sacred duty. Once again, characterizing Gandhi as a man of principle, as a man who is virtuous, okay, and ultimately operates out of the same values that Lord Irwin himself would say that he holds as a kind of representative of the humanist government of the British Empire. Okay. So let's try and craft a thesis statement that responds to this prompt, right? So after developing a brief observation about the context of this speech and taking account of the rhetorical situation, I want to get into a clear and concise statement of Gandhi's goal. Okay, so here What is Gandhi's goal? What is he attempting to persuade Lord Irwin and the British Empire to do? Well, to borrow Gandhi's own language, which is always a good thing to do when you're stating or restating a speaker's purpose, Gandhi attempts to persuade Lord Irwin and the British Empire to purify themselves, not itself, all right, let's go themselves, of the greedy and tyrannical abuse of the Indian people, as expressed specifically in the unjust salt tax. He accomplishes this goal by, now, okay, you see that that important and beautiful word, by. You see this transitional phrase here. He accomplishes this goal, and then, the great word, by. Now we know we're getting into some analysis of choices. All right, he accomplishes this goal by characterizing himself. All right, so now we're into that ethos argument. We don't have to say by using the ethos appeal. That's redundant. That's obvious, right? How does he use it? That's the question. That's the $1 million. That's the question that's going to pass you the exam. All right, he accomplishes his goal by characterizing himself as an unselfish, nonviolent, yet courageous man who aims to work for the benefit of all, even those who oppress him. All right, now how can I substantiate that with textual analysis, with close analysis of Gandhi's style? Well, I would go back into the text and I would talk about the significance of him conceding that nonviolence can seem like a mad risk, but he, as a man of courage and principle, is one who no amount of risk can stop him from doing that which is right. Why? Because he's a man of principle. He's brave. He's not a coward. He does what he believes to be right. He lives in light of the truth that he believes to be true. He's not a coward. All right. He also is nonviolent. How does he describe his mission? He wants to what? Quote, convert the British nation. He doesn't want to conquer. He doesn't want to boot them out. He doesn't want to shoot them. He doesn't want to hurt them. He doesn't want to make them bleed. He doesn't want to pay them back. He wants to convert them. All right, that language is inherently nonviolent, inherently sort of spiritually enlightened, and that is that sort of Gandhi ethos that made him so powerful and made him so popular as well. Okay. He even postures himself throughout the course of the argument, as I stated here, as working for the benefit of all, right? Including, significantly, Lord Irwin himself. I don't want to cause you embarrassment. You see what I'm saying? Right? So there's a number of different areas of text that we could get into to unpack the choices that Gandhi have made in order to develop his ethos appeal or his argument from ethos, okay? Well, what about pathos? Well, I've got a different sentence here because I just can't help but describe these things in full-bodied ways. His rhetoric also cultivates a healthy sense of shame. All right, now what realm are we in here? Well, we're in the realm of the emotional argument of the text, right? There is a sense that Gandhi, without coming right out and saying it, there's an implicit sense that Lord Irwin and the British Empire ought to have a kind of sense of shame, or perhaps the better word for it would be a kind of compunction, right, or conviction, right, would be a Christian word oftentimes that Christians use when confronted with their sin. All right, conviction or shame in the face of that you've done something wrong. Right? And Gandhi builds that impression and really highlights that or emphasizes that by giving Irwin what? Kindness. All right? He emphasizes the kindness that he's going to treat the British with. All right? The same way he would treat his own family, even though they have, quote, preyed on him and his people. Okay? So his own nonviolence is emphasized in this sort of figurative expression of the British's preying on him, okay? And finally, right, to think a little bit about the rational side of the argument, Gandhi deploys a line of reasoning in paragraph 4, right? Paragraph 4 specifically, I'm just going to deal with that as a chunk of the text itself, that leads to two simple conclusions. All right, Gandhi and his followers must protest the evils of British imperialism, and okay, so that's the first thing that they must do. Right, it's going to happen. Why? Because it's evil. right? It's inequitable. It needs to be purified of greed. All right. To say anything other than that is to say evil isn't evil. All right. Greed isn't bad. Exploitation isn't bad. All right. You make peace with that. You deem it not that bad. It's no longer evil. Right. You don't have anything to do about it. But if evil exists and you're confronted with it, then if you're going to maintain your ethical integrity, it is only rational for Gandhi and his followers to do something about it. He must. All right, so he's going to. That's the first thing that Irwin has to be confronted with. It's reasonable. It's going to happen. All right, now Irwin might disagree. Irwin might equivocate, say it's not actually evil. It's actually for our mutual benefit, and we've been doing this for a long time, and India has flourished under our colonial rule, and yada, 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 right? You could equivocate. But given the very simple argument deployed in paragraph 4, it's evil, so therefore we must do something about it, right? Posturing the logic of the argument as such is inherently persuasive for Gandhi, right? Because it doesn't even acknowledge all the equivocations that were so popular among colonists, particularly British colonists of India, right? Oh, this is for their benefit, and it's a mutual partnership, and yada, 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 right? Okay, he just says it's evil, it's exploitive, it smacks of greed, and so we're going to do something about it, all right? And the nonviolent protests will flood the justice system, right? There's going to be. It's not just me. You're gonna arrest, but tens of thousands. All right, thousands of protesters are going to join me in this, and there's no way that you're going to be able to process all of these prisoners. There's no way that you're going to be able to even arrest all of these individuals. So your justice system, which is inherently unjust, is going to be broken. All right, so I'm not going to shoot you. We're not going to kill you. We're not even going to resist arrest. But ultimately, we're going to point to the inequity of the system, all right, and we're not going to stop pointing at it until it changes. Okay, this leaves Irwin with what? No rational choice but to relent, but to alter their course of action. Okay, so our reading of the text leads to a well-crafted introduction and a well-crafted thesis statement that articulates what Gandhi's goal is and how Gandhi has accomplished this goal by using or by making observable rhetorical choices in the text. I think that all of you can do exactly what we just did. All right, you might not use the same exact words. All right, you might words like cultivate and deploy and a sense of shame that might not come immediately out of your brain. For some of you, you guys do write that way. Great, go ahead, feel free. You're super highbrow. Okay, good job. But for those of you that doesn't naturally occur to, listen, no problem. All you need to do is make sure that you give a good faith reading of what the speaker is trying to do. If you can read and you have access to even basic, fundamental vocabulary in the English language, you can write a sentence that definitely and clearly articulates what the speaker is trying to do. And then, right, you can summarize in your own words, in your own way, the choices that speaker have made in various sections or chunks of the text to develop their argument. You all can do that, all right? I am super confident of that. And that means that you all are 100% capable of getting one of the 6 points in the scoring criteria. And guess what? Once you get that 1 point and you have a really clear thesis statement, guess what becomes super easy or a lot easier to obtain? Points 0 through 4 here. All right, these 4 points that we're going to look at tomorrow, and also, Craigie, the sophistication point, everyone's favorite point. All right, we'll be talking about that later. Have an excellent day.